Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're very welcome, and just because of the power of the chair, I'd like to first, before I go to the next senator, recognize the members of Delta Sigma Theta that are in the audience, a service organization. And I'd also just like to note, for the record, so we have this in writing, that I am in a position higher than Tom Cotton physically, at least, and I think that's very important to note. I would now like to go to the next esteemed senator, handsome and brilliant. I recognize Senator Cory Booker. I've really appreciated the conversation from the panel, and more than you know, as I travel around the globe and look at developing nations and developing democracies, I've studied the work of Larry Diamond, who works at the conservative Hoover Institute at Stanford. I think we have this clutch our pearls kind of attitude that people in power don't try to affect rules that benefit their power. That's the reality. And the brilliance of our founders was try to design a government model where there would be checks and balances on that power. It states explicitly in the Constitution about our authority over federal election laws. And that's why I'm sort of stunned here about all this conversation that there are not attempts in around our country of people trying to rig the rules or to benefit them. And this isn't a partisan issue. I look at gerrymandering in America, and it is ridiculous. Both parties do it. They try to design maps that I think subvert the ideals of our democracy, which is that voters should choose their representatives, not their representatives choose their voters. I was very frustrated that in Congress before last, we tried to pass a bill that would have created far more drawing of electoral lines, but was blocked by House Republicans. It's not as partisan as people think, because when I was coming up in Newark, New Jersey, we had a very powerful political machine there. I believe they were doing things to subvert election fairness. And then Republican Chris Christie, who was the U.S. attorney at the time, stepped in to try to ensure fairness. So let's be clear, it happens. We know that there are people trying to game the system in ways that benefit their dominance in the political system. It is the natural inclinations that our founders talked about. The Federalist Papers have extraordinary expositions on to how power can corrupt, and we are trying to set fair laws to stop it. Gerrymandering is an example. Campaign finance rules, to me, it's outrageous to me. Even the Supreme Court said the fact that dark money could be drowning our politics like it is today. They called for a disclosure of that. We've tried time and time again, Democrats, to pass the Disclose Act. No American really wants dark money billionaires potentially having foreign influence to try to influence our elections. And so I'm not ascribing these issues towards racism. I'm describing them towards people that are trying to game the system. When the North Carolina, we already heard the quotes about designing something with surgical-like precision to racially affect the election. If you look at the actual emails that they pointed to of the legislators themselves, they were trying to glean electoral advantage, and their thinking was that black people were going to vote for Democrats, so let's design a system to stop black people from voting. And so that's the frustration. We're acting here like these things don't go on, like there aren't people always trying to game it that are having real effects. One of the most frustrating effects for me is just voting wait times. I've seen people designing it so college campuses, it's harder to vote, there's less voting machines, and there are lines I've seen that are outrageous trying to discourage kids from waiting online. Well, the same thing actually happens in African-American communities. In Georgia, the data, and I'll enter the article for the record without objection, no objection being heard, that demonstrate that the significantly longer wait that African-American neighborhoods have than white neighborhoods. And so I'm a little frustrated here that we who are guardians of our democracy, not trying to get political advantage, aren't trying to find ways to make the system more balanced and fair, because the system will be abused if we don't. I heard one of our witnesses talking about there being the voter turnout for African Americans. Hey, I've been psyched about it, but when you look at the growing racial disparities in voter turnout, the Brennan Center has a great point to this, these gaps are growing because of a lot of this gamesmanship. And so in the remaining minute that I have, I just want to ask about this issue of the racial gap in voter turnouts. And Ms. Camarillo, Can you talk about the barriers that voters of color are facing that could drive the kind of growing disparities here, and what we can do in a way to make the field more fair?
Well, it depends. Thank you. It depends on the states. But one of the things that they're concerned about is their vote's not going to be counted. That the laws also are not allowing them to participate. If they're low income and they live in neighborhoods where the voting polls have been either moved or they're too far away, it's very hard. If they need to get their voter ID, sometimes they don't have any resources or places are closed. And frankly, in Texas, the Attorney General at the time was Abbott, spent $1 million to demonstrate that there was fraud, and he found nothing. So for us at Southwest Voter, I have to say that yes, there are more Latinos and more Blacks and Asian communities and voters that are voting, but we're not taking into account the organization and the organizing that is happening by the communities themselves, in spite of the violations and the efforts to block them from voting. In the redistricting case in Texas, we've basically have lost 5 congressional seats that that should have been Latino majority seats. 2 that were weakened, the 15th and the 23rd, and 3 that we should have gained. And so we see this over and over. And so in that case, I was asked when I was deposed in our Senate Bill 1 litigation, isn't it true that you're going to be working in South Texas anyways, which is District 15? And I said, that's not the point. If voters think that their vote is not valued when it's cast, why should they turn out to vote?
Thank you. I'm over my time. I want to recognize Senator Thom Tillis next, and there's going to be a peaceful transfer of power now, something very important to the traditions of our government. I hand over chairmanship to the far more senior senator, more experienced, wiser, more hair, Senator Whitehouse.
I am flattered.